Dobrý večer, já se jmenuji Tomáš Etzler a vítejte na další debatě, živé debatě na Facebooku Melting Potu. Tato debata bude v angličtině, so I will switch to English right now. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm incredibly delighted to introduce our tonight's guest. I'm very happy that she was able to accept our invitation. Please welcome with me Dr. Jane Goodall, world-leading environmentalist, primatologist. Thank you very much, Dr. Goodall, for joining us. Welcome to the program.
No, thank you very much for inviting me too.
I will go straight, I just want to ask you, how are you? And especially, how did you deal with the pandemic we were all going through?
Well, I have to say that when the lockdown first began, I was incredibly frustrated and actually angry. And I was actually getting into the car to drive to the airport to give a talk in Brussels. And then as I was just about to drive away, my sister rushed out and said, "No, get out, they've cancelled the meeting, the UN's closed the building," and that's where my talk was. So then, having felt frustrated because everything was cancelled, I thought, no, this is silly. Rather than be frustrated, let's find a way ahead. And so I and my team have been trying to build a virtual Jane, reaching out through all this social media and Zooms and Skypes and video messages and you name it. I've never been as busy in my whole life, never.
Well, tell me, what, if anything, can people learn from this pandemic, or what this pandemic can teach us about how people behave towards environment?
Well, as a matter of fact, it's our fault that we're in the middle of this pandemic because it's been predicted for many, many, many years by scientists studying these so-called zoonotic diseases, the diseases that spill over from an animal to a human. And we have been disrespecting the environment, which means we've been cutting down, for example, forests, forcing animals together, new diseases created among the animals as one species of bacteria jumps over, but then also pushing them into closer contact with people because we're taking up their habitat. And that's an opportunity for a spillover. And then on top of that, we're hunting them, killing them, eating them, and trafficking them. So animals from many places come together to the wildlife meat markets of Asia, and in very unhygienic conditions, animals of different species from different countries. It's an absolutely perfect environment for, in this case, the COVID-19 virus to hop over from a particular animal, nobody's quite sure which, into a person, and from there it's gone all around the world. And there are the bushmeat markets in Africa. It was killing and eating and selling chimpanzees that led to HIV/AIDS, a horrible pandemic. And, there are so many examples of diseases that have started in this way. And also the cruelty and the unhygienic conditions of the intensive factory farming, which again has created conditions where viruses or bacteria have jumped over into people. And so it's our disrespect of the environment, our disrespect of animals that has led us into this horrible, really world-changing pandemic with its impacts on people's lives and the economy.
Thank you. Let me just remind to our viewers again, you are watching another debate of Melting Pot today with world-renowned environmentalist Dr. Jane Goodall. Dr. Goodall, you said that we are disrespecting environment, but it's not. We were discussing we were talking about the pandemic, about the transmission of the disease to humans. But there are other huge issues regarding environment, such as global warming, such as the extinction of species, which is happening. The scientists are talking about the sixth extinction, warming of the oceans, the growing acidity of the oceans. How bad it is, how much trouble, if you can summarize, how much trouble is the global environment in right now?
The global environment is in terrible, terrible trouble. And all of the factors, everything that we're doing to the environment, it's led to the pandemic, it's leading to the climate crisis, the sixth great extinction. And when I was out in the forest in Gombe National Park, where I'd been studying the chimpanzees, I got to really understand out in the rainforest the interconnectedness of all living things and how one little species could become extinct, even locally extinct. And it wouldn't seem to matter, but maybe that was the main food of another species and so on. And so there could be a ripple effect. And that has, in several occasions, led to total ecosystem collapse. So this, it's everything that we're doing coming together now. We're at literally close to a point of no return. Because we must respect the environment. We're part of the environment. We depend on it for food and water and shelter. We depend on the forests for absorbing carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen, the oceans as well. And, with our intensive agricultural farming, we're changing from small family farming with diversity of crops and enabling the bees to fertilize, no poisons used. Now monocultures, genetically modified foods. And so the soil itself is being poisoned with all these chemical pesticides and herbicides. And it's just poisoning us as well. It's not just that the environment will and the animals will go, we will too. And what about our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren? Don't we care about them? Will we go on stealing their future in this way? Or will we get together in the time we have left, the little time, and work towards a different kind of future, a different way of interacting with the environment and a different kind of economy too?
I mean, I think that the situation is so serious that the environment, the eroding of the environment and the destruction of environment is eroding the capabilities of this planet to maintain human life. Is that too alarming, or is it true?
No, I think it's true. And there's two other things. Well, there's three things to mention. One, we have to learn in the affluent societies to do with a bit less, to really think about what we need. And not just always want more and more and more as a mark of success. Success should be having a happy life. Then there's the question of poverty, because if you're living in real poverty, you're going to cut down the last trees in your desperation to grow more food, or fish the last fish, or in an urban area, you're going to buy the cheapest junk food. You can't afford to say, did it harm the environment when it was made? You can't afford it. You just have to do what you have to do. And then today, there is estimated 7.2 billion people on the planet. And this planet has finite natural resources. And already some of them are being used up faster than nature can replenish them. In 2050, it's estimated there'll be 9.7 billion people. So what's going to happen? I can't answer that question. But people don't like talking about it. It's politically insensitive, but we must think about it, surely.
Tell me from your own experience, you already mentioned Africa. I know you've been traveling to Africa for 60 years now. In the 1960s, I believe you first traveled to the forest of Gombe in Tanzania. Tell me, in those years, through your eyes, through your experiences, how that forest, for example, or how the environment in Tanzania changed in front of your own eyes? I mean, what are the changes you experience?
Well, everything's changed, quite honestly, just about everything. Starting with the end of colonialism in Tanzania. It used to be German East Africa, and then the Brits took over, and while I was there, it became independent. That was one change. But you mean, well, when I first began at Gombe in 1960, it was part of a forest that stretched right across to the west coast of Africa, almost unbroken, chimpanzee habitat, and, you know, many other animals. By 1990, when I flew over in a small plane, there was this little island of forest, and it was surrounded by completely bare hills, more people living there than the land could support, too poor to buy food elsewhere, cutting down the trees, as I say, to grow food, the rivers silting up with the terrible soil erosion, and chimpanzees, which did spread right across that part of Tanzania, their numbers reduced. The chimpanzee numbers right across Africa terribly reduced as their forests are depleted, fragmented, which is a really serious issue, because when chimpanzees can't move from one forest to another, then you tend to get inbreeding, chimpanzees and other animals too. And when I first went to the Serengeti, the famous Serengeti, the Kilimanjaro, so famous, the top was covered in snow all the year round. Now, sometimes you hardly see any snow at all. We know the glaciers melted. Serengeti used to be teeming with animals, and the animals were not confined to the national parks. You'd find them all over the place. And now, of course, it's changed, and there's roads, and the roads intersect the habitats, and the Chinese want to pay for a road to cut right across the Serengeti, which will destroy this fantastic wildebeest migration, one of the great sites of the world. So it's changed. Even, yeah, I'm in England, in the house where I grew up. And when I was a child, I used to set the alarm so that at 4 o'clock I could hear the beautiful dawn chorus of the birds. Now, 2 or 3, that they've nearly all gone because with use of herbicides. People want nice tidy lawns. They put paving down everywhere. The hedgehogs have gone. The whole world, the environment has horribly changed.
Excuse me and forgive me, but I have to ask you this personal question. How does it make you feel? Are you angry? Are you sad? Are you frustrated?
All 3 of those things. But, you know, that's why I spend so much time developing this program for young people, Roots and Shoots, which, by the way, has got quite a few groups in the Czech Republic and an office in the Prague Zoo. And so, you know, it was when I was traveling around the world in the late 80s and early 90s, I was meeting so many young people who seemed to have lost hope. Oh, you've harmed our future and there's nothing we can do about it, they said. So yes, we have harmed. We've stolen their future. We're still stealing it today. But is it too late? We've got this window of time. And so I began this program, Roots and Shoots. Its main message is every individual makes a difference every day, and we get to choose the kind of difference that we make. Every group chooses 3 different projects just because everything's interconnected. And it's to help people, animals, and the environment, because we're all in it together. And when I flew over Gombe, as I described, and looked down and saw people struggling to survive, that's when it hit me. If we don't help these people find alternative ways of making a living and destroying the forest, then there's no hope to save the chimpanzees. And that's where we began our Jane Goodall Institute, Take Care or to Come.
Excuse me, it was on my part.
I don't have one of those, so it couldn't be me.
Yeah. I want to, you mentioned young children. It also gives me hope, you know, like I cannot possibly, you know, if I go to a shopping, to a store, my daughter, I don't even dare to touch plastic, for example, and she's 11 years old. I think these kids are so much more aware than of what's going on and what needs to be done than perhaps those people you were discussing. You just said, you know, you were talking about, you know, like in 1980s, 1990s. So there is hope, because I think that a lot of young people, you know, also in the Czech Republic and in other countries, seem to be very aware of what's going on and the dangers they are facing. You know, the whole movement, the Greta Thunberg started, you know, it's it gives us hope, doesn't it?
Well, yes, and like I say, I began Roots and Shoots in '91. It's now in over 65 countries. It's got members in kindergarten, university, everything in between. And everywhere I go, when I am traveling, there's these young people with shining eyes wanting to tell Dr. Jane what they've been doing to make this world a better place. They roll up their sleeves, they take action. Yes, they may join a demonstration, but they're planting trees, they're clearing streams of garbage, they're cleaning up the beaches, they're raising money to help refugees or people after an earthquake. They're taking action. It's my greatest reason for hope. Absolutely.
So is it correct to assume that you are an optimist when it comes to this? Because, I sometimes wonder if we as a humanity reached the tipping point yet or not, or is it still some sort of space for and time to divert the disaster which we are heading towards?
Well, I'm afraid we're pretty close to a tipping point, and that's partly because so many of the world's leaders, political leaders, have swung to the far right, and they're definitely putting short-term benefit over protection of the environment. But, with this little window of time we have, my hope lies in the fact that perhaps this pandemic, the silver lining, is it is waking people up. And maybe the groundswell of people who don't want to go back to the old polluted ways will grow and grow. And eventually the politicians will just have to listen, and big business too. We have a powerful role to play, because if we don't like what they're doing, if they're harming the environment, then we must not buy their products. And again, we have to eliminate poverty so that people have that choice.
You almost answered the question of one of the questions which I'm getting now from the viewers is, how much that pandemic could have helped, also not only from the reason you just mentioned, but also from the reason that we see when we stop that massive human activity, that actually things are getting better. Animals are returning, rivers are cleaner. In Venice, you could see all the way to the bottom of the canals there. Yeah. Do you think that, does it give you hope that this is a dynamic, or this is a momentum maybe some societies can catch up on?
Yeah, I think the ordinary people, hundreds and thousands of them. I mean, that you've got to realize there's all these numbers of people in poverty who've lost their jobs, and they're desperate. So they too want to get back to some sort of business as usual. So I think the thing is, we need to get back to business, but not as usual, not as it was. And I'm not in a position to work out exactly how we should move forward. But all I know is we must move towards a different relation with the environment. And it's not going to be easy, but if we don't, then we've had it.
I assume, or what I'm hearing you saying is that basically it must be people, and it must be people, like you or me, or people who are watching us right now, because because the war, it's not just what's happening at the moment, but it's also who is doing it. If you look who is in power right now in, for example, the United States, a person, a president who revised so many environmental laws and so many environmental rules that were there protecting the nature of the United States. Then you have president of Brazil. I was reading somewhere some horrifying fact that in Brazil right now, forest of size of football field disappears in every 7 seconds at this point. So we cannot expect, and the leaders in the Czech Republic are very similar to that, at this moment, I'm not saying it's going to stay like this. So I guess it's up to the people to do this, or how do you expect something to change when you have people, global leaders, including the president of China, like this?
Well, the problem is, in some countries where there's a semblance of democracy, and democracy seems to be crumbling everywhere, but then they can do a lot because they're responsible for voting in the people who will protect the environment. But there are some countries where people can't protest, where they can't vote for change. That, you know, they're living in a dictatorship. And so it's up to the rest of us to be strong enough to make the change for them, because the young people want it everywhere. But they just, you know, some countries where if you demonstrated, if you did a demonstration about climate change, you'd probably be put in jail.
Yes, you know, I'm optimistic also that I mentioned these countries, you know, where I see young people, you know, mostly in Europe, but I also seen people in Bali, for example, in Indonesia, cleaning up children, you know, at schools, you know, it's part of their programs, and other parts of the developing world. What would you advise normal, common people, you know, like who have no connections to big business or to political power? What can people do in their everyday life in UK, where you live, in the Czech Republic, where we are right now, in the United States? What can people do in everyday life to help to abate this crisis?
Well, it depends on who you are, but everybody can think about the choices, the consequences of the choices they make each day. The little ones, you know, what do you eat? And we know now, I mentioned the factory farming and how cruel it is for animals. But in addition to that, there are now billions and billions of animals around the world in these concentration camps, and they have to be fed. So forests are being cleared to grow the grain to feed them. Fossil fuel is being burned to get the grain to the animals, to the abattoir, to the meat, to the table. They're producing methane gas, which is a very virulent greenhouse gas, you know, along with CO2. And they're using up a lot of water, and fresh water is drying up. And it takes a lot of water to change vegetable to animal protein. So in all these ways, people can make these conscious decisions. I became a vegetarian because I had no idea there were these factory farms. And I looked at the meat on my plate and I thought, this represents fear, pain, death. That was it. But now knowing about the environmental consequences as well, and the fact that the misuse of antibiotic just to keep the poor things alive, sick or not sick, has led to these superbugs that are killing us. So everything that we're doing to make money, to make food cheaper, to push out the small family farms is harming us as well as the environment. And maybe if enough people understand it's really hurting them. But, you know, you ask what people can do. Well, we don't buy food from companies that we don't agree with their ethic. We try to make ethical choices. We write letters, we lobby, we do whatever we can, but let's let our voices be heard.
From all these things we mentioned, you know, like global warming, the pollution, the sixth extinction, is there something in your mind that is the worst? You know, like what worries the worst? What would be the first priority, you know, for the world to do? I mean, for the nations.
Well, I don't really know. I don't think I can answer that because it's all so interrelated that to try and tackle one and not another. But, you know, definitely, I suppose, a key one is stop destroying the environment. I mean, that's what I put first because that's what I care about tremendously. And destroying the environment is, you know, we're contributing to it in all these different ways. So to help the environment, we also have to stop doing so many other things like the burning of fossil fuels and the factory farms and the modern agricultural business. You know, it's all interrelated, isn't it?
Yep, that's true. Another thing is, besides, you know, we discussed some very serious and very kind of a pessimistic things, but we mentioned the young generations. But besides the young generation, is there anything you've seen in the news or you've seen, you know, on your travel or in your studies in recent years or recent months that makes you feel better that things can actually turn around
Absolutely.
for the better?
First of all, First of all, you know, we differ from chimpanzees and other animals mostly because the explosive development of our intellect. And we haven't used it very wisely, but scientists are beginning to use to create amazing technology that truly will help us to live in greater harmony with the environment. People are beginning to think about their own ecological footprint, what they can do. And then nature is so resilient. And this COVID-19 pandemic has shown how nature can reclaim. But, you know, I've seen places where maybe there was a quarry used by a cement company or something that was, yes, you know, a devastating gash of bare rock almost. Those places have been restored. Nature has come back. Animals live there again. And there are so many little places around the world that I've seen where nature has returned. And that's the kind of thing that makes the youth really excited. You know, they can clear up a piece of barren area in the city if they get permission, and they can grow organic food, they can have organic garden, they can plant flowers that will attract the bees to help with the pollination. You know, nature really can come back if we give her a chance.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We've seen it. I've got another question here from a viewer. Do you believe in collective consciousness, in a sense that if we all believe, or if we all believe that the situation is really bad, that all of us will slowly but surely fall into some skepticism, and we will not be able to do anything with the world? Do you believe in that there is some sort of like a mass consciousness which can also be improved?
Yes. Well, I think, you know, the mass consciousness, in the way I'm thinking of it, is that more and more and more and more and more people understand what we should be doing. And we have more discussion about how to do what we should be doing, how to get to the goal that we want to achieve. And so a mass consciousness, you know, can come from education. You talk about the children doing projects in the developing world. Roots and Shoots began in Tanzania. There isn't a single part of Tanzania now where there aren't young people who are working to heal the environment, to help animals, to help people. And yeah. I mean, and you know, they retain these values into adulthood. So when I go to China, and I've been going there since the mid-90s, people come up to me and say, of course I care about the environment. I was in your Roots and Shoots program in primary school. Of course I care about animals. I never be cruel to them. I learned about that when I saw your chimpanzee films when I was in Roots and Shoots in primary school. So they hang on to the values they acquired.
There is another question here from a viewer. It's also a comment, a kind of a serious comment about if anybody follows, you know, yes, the COVID pandemic helped the nature in many ways, in many senses we just discussed, but also there was so much chemicals, you know, in disinfectants, and, you know, all these chemicals are usually in one-use plastic bags or plastic containers. Are there anybody following this, or did you hear anything chasing this? How much of it was actually wasted or impacted? You know, how much of it impacted the planet?
I mean, it's been worrying me for a long time. And the other day, I saw an underwater picture of the floor of the Mediterranean. It was absolutely thick with syringes, with rubber gloves, with empty hand sanitizer bottles, with masks. Just awful. So indeed, that is a problem. And, you know, so often when you solve one problem, it leads to another. You find it again and again and again. So it's a huge problem, but the program I saw said, we're now working out how we can clean this up when the pandemic's over. And it's our fault. We should have thought about this. We should have had places where all of this could easily be disposed of, shouldn't we?
We discussed several, yeah, go ahead.
One other problem with the, you know, we cleaned up the atmosphere with no flying, but tourism has virtually stopped at least in East Africa, and the governments relied on tourism to bring in foreign exchange, and it paid the rangers who protected the areas from poachers. And so actually what's happening is poaching is spiking up because the rangers are so reduced and there's no money coming in. So, you know, you solve a problem, but you create a problem.
We addressed several problems. We talked about several issues and topics. Today is the World Environment Day. I would like to end with one question. If you would have one wish that could be, or that should be fulfilled right away, what would that be?
It's regarding the environment. Bit difficult, isn't it? I'm going to say, will you answer it as well? I'll have a go at it. If I could have one wish, I would wish that there would be something swooping down from I don't know where and gathering up all our world business and government leaders who simply deny the importance of saving the environment. With them gone, then I think we could do so much. Now your turn.
I wish that people who are in power, in big business or in politics around the world would come to senses and realize that doing what they are doing at this moment will destroy the life on this planet, not only the animal's life, but human life. And I have two small children. I have a granddaughter also. And I want them to see what I've seen when I was growing up, you know, the nature and the animals. And I want them to live in a healthy environment, not struggling for water, not struggling for food in 20, 30 years.
Yep.
So I wish these leaders to come to senses.
So my threat of swooping them all away into the ether maybe cause them to think differently. So my wish can lead to your wish.
Dr. Goodall, thank you very much. I'm receiving many more comments, people thanking you for your work and for your calm voice and a voice of hope. Dr. Goodall, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope to welcome you one day or in person to meet you in Prague. Have a good day. Thank you.
I will definitely look forward to meeting you when I next come to Prague, which I hope will be soon. So thank you, Thomas, and I've enjoyed our conversation, and hello to all the listeners. And maybe I'd end up with the distance greeting of the chimpanzee, because it's a good way to end. Yes. Since we're all far away from each other, we go.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and stay safe and good health. Thank you.
You too. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.